Hey guys, it's me, Ebony. Welcome to my English 4 project on Danez Smith and Franny Choi, who are contemporary LGBTQIA plus writers to know. This is Danez Smith. They use they, them pronouns, and they're a Black queer writer and performer. Danez Smith was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. They are the recipient of many fellowships and have appeared in several magazines and journals in their time as an artist. They talk about their experience with identity in a country that doesn't encourage sexuality and within a universe that likes to kick and knock people down. In many of their works, they speak to the feelings and ideas brought on by being ashamed of intersecting identities. Just a side note, the reason that folks is spelled with an X in this context is to be inclusive of all people among all marginalized communities. In an interview with community platform Them, Smith says, I want to be shamelessly Black, gay, unapologetically neurodivergent, If there's one tool people can call for my poems, it's that shame is one of the best unburdenings you can do. Homie is Smith's most recent book published in January of 2020. The reason I use this quote from Grey Wolf Press is because I believe that it says it all and perfectly. It is truly a great collection of poems, and if you're ever thinking of reading it, I encourage you to do so. Don't Call Us Dead, written in 2017 by Smith, is a collection of poems that speaks to the topics of police brutality, the excessive loss of Black lives in America, their experience as a Black person in the U.S., and their diagnosis of HIV. The collection, quote, confronts America where every day is too often a funeral and not often enough a miracle. This book is actually available in our library here at Halls, and I read a poem in it my sophomore year that I still have to this day. The poem is called, and even the Black Guy's profile reads, Sorry, no Black Guys, and I'll put a picture of it at the end. Insert Boy, published in 2014, is Danez Smith's debut poetry collection. There are several different themes in this collection, including their relationship with abuse, sexuality, racial injustice, and many more. In this book, they call for, quote, a world in which Black boys and men are loved. In H. Melt's review from Lambda Literary, quote, the body is present on almost every page, particularly the mouth, knees, and hands, which is more than likely symbolic to the topics I just mentioned. The podcast Versus, hosted by Franny Choi and Danez Smith, is described simply as, quote, the podcast where poets confront the ideas that move them. Since the start of this project, I've been listening to it just to get a sense of both artists and their non-professional element, and it's been a pleasure to do so. They interview other poets for about an hour and host really deep and meaningful conversations about their work and how their lives tie into their art. The podcast can be found almost everywhere that podcasts can be found, but you can choose a place to listen with a simple search of VS Podcast. Ebony Simone, I like to listen to it on Spotify. Dark Noise is a collective of artists who discuss, quote, identity, intersectionality, trauma, and healing throughout their own modes of art. The two artists I'm highlighting today, Franny Choi and Danez Smith, are co-founders of this group along with 3 other artists. The group hasn't done work together in a few years, but I still feel like it was important to highlight their work because this collective is very powerful and has definitely made an impact on the poetry world. This is Franny Choi. She uses she, her pronouns. She's Korean and identifies as queer. Franny Choi has a long educational history, getting a BA, Bachelor of Arts from Brown, and an MFA, Master of Fine Arts, at the University of Michigan. She's received a number of different acknowledgments and reviews on her works. Her poetry focuses on her ideas on femininity and having a queer identity while being Korean, which we'll get into in just a few moments. She currently lives in Northampton, which I find to be pretty interesting because she's basically our neighbor, and she has a quarantine hobby of making clothes that can be seen on her Instagram. Franny Choi's Soft Science was inspired by a character from the film Ex Machina. She wrote to understand the character after feeling a mixture of emotions that she didn't quite understand at the time. She ended up writing about her experience as a queer Asian American woman, quote, living as a soft, fleshy, objectified human of the world. This book is also available here in the library at Halls, and there's a poem that I like that I will put at the end. It's called Flower Moon. This work of poems, titled Floating, Brilliant, Gone, was published in 2014. It exposes so many different emotions regarding issues around intersecting identities, loss, and mental health issues. I chose the 9-month experimental writing series Periodic because I felt like I got to experience the depths of the mind of Franny Choi. In each column, she expressed the thoughts that were on her mind in a seemingly raw way that spoke to me very authentically, almost like I was reading her thoughts or having a conversation with her. These are just some of her other poems that aren't in collections. They can be found on her website at frannychoi.com. So that's all for the presentation. I think this project has been really meaningful for me in terms of opening my eyes to new artists and finding connections I never knew were there. I have 2 new favorite poets, and I've never had favorite poets before, so that's pretty cool and different. The issues that these artists cover in their works are held very closely to me, and I think their voices are very important in the poetry world. I've always liked the idea of reading and writing poetry, but these 2 artists and this research project especially have encouraged me to find a new appreciation for it. So I'm going to leave y'all with 2 poems from one of each of their works. They are accessible in the Miss Hall's library. I was going to read them to you, but I figured I'll just put them on the screen. Thank you.